All right, guys, today's the big day. We are going to start printing. So I've got my styrofoam. I've got a damp sponge, okay? And by damp, I mean it's got water in it. If I squeezed it out on my table right now, water would be on my desk. But it's not like sopping wet and it's not like just lightly damp. Okay, so grab a kitchen sponge or ask mom and dad if there's a new sponge that you can borrow. If you don't have access to a sponge because you just don't have it in your house, you can use a damp paper towel, but you might have to go back and get a couple more paper towels as you go. Just like you might have to actually re-moisten the sponge as well. Okay, so what that sponge is going to do is that it's going to basically wipe down your printmaking paper. Okay, so we're wiping the surface. It should look a little glossy, but not like wet, if that makes sense. So you're basically pressing the moisture into the paper. All right, and then you don't want to do it too much or not enough. It will start to dry. And then you're going to carefully take your styrofoam and you're going to place it on the center of your paper. And I kind of drop it and don't move. And I'm going to rub the back side. So I'm rubbing the back side, and this is going to ensure that it's kind of stuck to my paper. And now I'm going to carefully take both. So I'm pressing on my desk with some pressure, and I'm sliding it, grabbing it, and flipping it over. And then I'm going to rub again. Now that step is kind of tricky, and so if you feel like it's a little precarious and you might lose the print, don't do that step. You can just press from the back side. It will work pretty well, but whenever you are able to print from the front side, that is best. And I will show you a different option in a second. So I'm going to carefully unveil and see what happens. And super cool. So here is my print, and here is what happens on the paper. Okay, so you can look at the styrofoam. There's still some marker there. We could try to print what's called a ghost print in printmaking. It's the second print. So we're going to pull this one over to the side and leave it off there. I'm going to take my sponge and I'll show you the different way to apply your project. Now, even just after one print, my sponge is getting kind of dry, so I may want to go back and get it more wet or squeeze it out a little bit onto my paper. But again, if your paper is too wet, your picture is going to run, so you won't get a nice clean print like that. All right, so the other option is to take the styrofoam and place that down, and then carefully place the wet-sided part of your paper on top and drop it down. And then that way you don't have to try to do the flip maneuver, and you can just rub from the paper side, which is the top of the print. The reason why rubbing on the back side of your styrofoam isn't as effective is just because it's purely the back side. So if you're able to rub the front side, then you can get a little bit more detail in. All right, so I'm using my fist, I'm using my hands, but I'm holding steady as I go to make sure that my paper doesn't slip, because it's not going to be nearly as sticky as it would be if we were doing like printmaking with ink in the classroom. All right, so I think I've done it as much as I can. And voila, here's my reveal. So you can see the difference between the first print and the ghost print. And while the ghost print probably you're going to decide isn't as cool, it does provide some opportunities later. Like printmaking is super cool because a lot of times printmakers use their print as a background and then they go back and paint over it, draw over it. So this ghost print could still be effective in another form of art. Maybe this print is cool on its own, but then this one, you know, somebody grabs a black Sharpie once the paper is dry and like adds some extra design elements in there. So you definitely have options in printmaking. Kind of the world is your oyster is kind of a common phrase, and that's kind of how I feel about printmaking. So let's go ahead and see how my rainbow print does. I'm going to go re-wet my sponge and clean off my surface. Okay, so I did clean off my styrofoam, and this is all the marker that remains. So it is going to stain your styrofoam a little bit, and that's okay. But I'm going to let it dry, or I could pat it dry with a paper towel or like a kitchen towel, and I could recolor it. So let's say your print didn't turn out the way you wanted it, or you want to try another color combination. Well, now's your chance. You dry it off, you recolor it, and you print again. And for this project, you are going to turn in multiple prints. either 2 different designs if you were able to use both of your styrofoams, or 1 design and multiple prints. So that way we can see the different options and you can choose your favorite from there. All right, so we have my experimental project, as we'll call it, with the rainbow dots. I'm gonna grab my paper. Oops, it got wet from my sponge earlier, but that's okay. Remember that you want your paper to be damp, but not like sitting water on it. That little staining there is just because the water sat on it for a while I was working on that other print, but it'll dry and it'll be white again. Okay, so I'm gonna go with the second method just because there's less flipping to do. And I'm gonna carefully place the wet side down. Make sure the wet side isn't facing you. The wet touches the wet, so the wet marker touches the wet paper. And just get it as centered as you can. The cool part is that on Artsonia you can crop it, so no one will know if you were a little crooked on your design. All right, so I'm using my fist and I'm going all over, just double checking, and I'm always holding one hand steady as I rub. Okay, and I think I'm about ready to release and see what happens. Drum roll. Oh, okay, cool. So it turned out a little bit more interesting than I thought it would. And here's the cool part. When you put these side to side, notice that it's symmetrical on this y-axis because you're flipping it upside down and you're essentially making the mirror image of it. So that's part of the reason why we chose to do more of a geometric pattern, because you don't have to worry about anything being flipped inadvertently because of the symmetry part of printmaking. But I actually like the black just juxtaposed to the rainbow dots. But I feel like there's missed opportunities. Like I can do some other things with this. So I definitely think I am going to rinse off this one and try some different prints out. So you've got your styrofoam. So whether you were able to make 2 different designs on styrofoam because you wanted to, or you just have one design, you are going to turn in 2 prints. I repeat them, 2 prints. So you're going to pick out your favorites of however many you do, and you're going to turn in those 2 individually to Artsonia when you are finished. Take your time. You have a couple days to do this. The cool part about it is, like, unless your styrofoam falls apart, you can keep washing it off, drying it off, and recoloring and reprinting. If you happen to run out of drawing paper, go ahead and use your sketchbook as a backup. Do not use that heavy tag board. It has a slicker surface and it won't transfer as well. The drawing paper will suck up the marker better and create better prints. So again, don't use that heavy thick tag board. You're going to be using the drawing paper. All right. Happy printing, guys.